Welcome back to the latest episode of Best Spot Available. I'm Joe DeLeone here with Ryan Roberts. We've got lots to discuss with the 2026 NFL draft class heating up. Biggest thing that we got to discuss is a lot happening after the Fiesta Bowl between Indiana and Oregon. There is an aftershock for the quarterback discussion for this year. Ryan, let's start by talking about Fernando Mendoza, who has been an established presence at the top of the 2026 NFL draft. Since he won the Heisman, since the final month of the season, it's been a foregone conclusion that he is the first overall pick. I stand on that side, that I think that Mendoza has confirmed he's worthy of it. Maybe he is not your Caleb Williams or just insanely gifted type of a prospect that you drop everything to go get. He has proven a lot to be a player who can set a solid foundation for a team needing a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle sometimes with Mendoza, Joe, because like in this class right now, I do think that he is the foregone number one overall draft pick as long as everything checks out in the draft process. But it's the old conversation that we have often had on any iteration of the podcast that we've had is the ceiling versus floor debate at the number one overall draft pick. Because I feel like we both agree at this, Joe, that like Fernando Mendoza is going to go to the Raiders and he is going to substantially raise the floor of the quarterback room because he does a lot of the processing stuff really well. He's an accurate quarterback. He does the little things that matter. But when you're drafting a first overall quarterback, you're not just drafting for the floor. You're also drafting for the potential ceiling of a guy that can turn your team into a championship contender within the next several years of control. So that's where I kind of struggle with Fernando Mendoza. I think he's going to be the first overall selection. I think that in this class that is not very good, I'm fine with him being in that slot, but I still do struggle with the fact that I just don't see superstar. I don't see elevator. I see a really good I see a good player and when things are really good around him, a la a Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins, and that's not an insult to him because both of those players have been good quarterbacks in the NFL, but are you ever going to see a guy that's going to be a true elevator? I'm not sure if I see that with Fernando Mendoza.
I'm not pitching him to be like some sort of a Patrick Mahomes-esque prospect or Josh Allen type of a guy. He's not. He's just not that type of an athlete. But I slightly push back on this belief that he would just be a middle-of-the-pack quarterback in the NFL. I think that he capably could become a top 10 quarterback in the league. I think that the Matt Ryan comparison that keeps getting pushed out there, I think is very fair. Matt Ryan won an MVP. And for the rest of his career, he was firmly probably sitting at that 10 spot where everybody would have loved to have Matt Ryan, but he never was in that top upper pocket except for that MVP season. The thing that I love about Mendoza that I think separates him, he does have the traits of a guy who can be a quality, impactful starter, but I think that he is one of the most decisive prospects that we've seen come out. I think that we need to value more the decision-making that he brings to the table. He is willing to be incredibly aggressive, and he doesn't think twice. I think that a lot of times we get these quarterbacks that come out that are just awfully timid, are awfully afraid to take risks, and it leads to some pretty bad play in their first couple of years. That holds back a lot of guys from taking a jump, and many of which don't make that jump until later on in their careers. We see from Mendoza right now that he has that aggressiveness that is hard to come by, that requires development of confidence through multiple seasons in the NFL. I think that that is where Mendoza could step right in and immediately be a really quality player. It's also kind of like what makes Drake May really good right now is Drake May just goes out there and plays. He's not a guy who I ever feel like is holding back. He's got any restraint. He's just going out there and he's attacking. I feel like Mendoza could do that. And the other last part with this that's really underrated, that's not talked about enough, he is not twitchy, ridiculous athlete that is going to, run away from everybody. But his pocket awareness and his ability to evade pressure, I think, is really, really underrated.
I think he's good at working the pocket from the inside, but I don't think he's great of avoiding pressure coming from the outside. Like, I think that he actually kind of struggles with a little bit of tunnel vision when he's got his eyes downfield from outside pressure. So I will absolutely push back on that aspect of it, Joe. Like, I will. I think that the Indiana offensive line is also a very underrated group that has kind of kept him pretty clean throughout most of the year. But when I watch Mendoza, and I've watched him now on 3 different occasions. Like, I remember watching him at Cal before the season, and I've watched him 2 different times this year, and I've always liked him, but I've never fallen in love with him. Like, I just can't get there with him, man. And again, it's no disrespect to him. I think that he is going to be a good quarterback in the NFL, but I don't think that your aim is to draft a good quarterback with the number 1 overall draft pick. You're trying to draft somebody that potentially be the difference maker of your franchise changer. And when you compare him to other classes, like I know the 2024 class is one that we've talked about a lot because that was a loaded class. It's like Mendoza, if you drop him in the 2024 class, what number quarterback is he in that group? Right? Like with Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Jake May,
I'd comfortably put him ahead of Bo Nix. I think that he'd be behind May. I mean, he'd be 4, and he'd be more of an obvious. Like, I wouldn't debate him going in the top 10 of that class.
Can I ask you this question though? Because I agree with you. He would be above Bo Nix for myself as well, and Michael Penix. I didn't like either one of those players as prospects. My question is he closer to the Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniel tier, or is he closer to the Bo Nix, Michael Penix tier? Because I think that, and J.J. McCarthy tier, like that conversation is the unique one to me, is where is he closer to in that spectrum?
Well, the problem is I think he falls perfectly in the middle. That's what makes this conversation a little bit odd, because those guys that you're mentioning on the back end, Penix and McCarthy are flawed because they were raw and they weren't fully developed, and we haven't seen the development that we were hoping for. The guys at the upper group had very rare tools that made them incredibly enticing prospects. I think Mendoza leans more in the direction of the upper group, but he is very firmly in the middle, because I think he's a better decision maker than Bo Nix. I think that he's got better traits than Bo Nix, but there's not much of a significant margin in terms of those traits, because I think Bo Nix is a better athlete than Mendoza is. The general bit with all of this is I don't think that we have to relate Mendoza back to other classes, though. This is overall a really bad class. Let's just be quite frank about it. This is not a good draft class. It's a really, really bad class. And there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. So if you're the Raiders and you don't think you like Mendoza, someone else will. Someone else is going to want to have the chance to go and get a quarterback. I think if it's close enough that it's perceived that Mendoza can help get your franchise on the right track, you shouldn't think twice about it. I think that there is a general overthink with setting up your team for success and drafting a quarterback. Just pull the trigger if you feel like he has franchise elevation capability, instead of bringing in some ass free agent that is going to be a stopgap until you just start this process all over again in 3 years, like the Raiders did with Geno Smith.
Right. Well, and I think that we align on the perspective that in this class, I'm okay with Fernando Mendoza being the first overall draft pick for a quarterback needy team. I'm okay with it because this class is not good. Like, at the top, it's not great. And then I don't know about you, Joe, but like when I've done second and third round mock drafts this cycle, I am like pulling teeth, brother. I'm like at the end of the second round where I'm like, I think this is a day 3 football player that I just went at number 60 overall. Like, it's really, really bad this year. So I'm okay with him being the first overall selection. I'm just saying, when you put on that hat of a guy being the first overall selection, you compare it to other years, and most years of a guy that you would conceive will be the top selection, that's where the comparisons, I think, fall slightly short to me. Good player, great player. I'm not so sure about the latter on that one.
Other quarterback in this class that is going to get a lot of buzz is Dante Moore, and he was trending towards, I think, establishing himself as obviously the second overall pick. At the time of taping this, Dylan Raiola is heading to Oregon. I think that decision has been made for Dante Moore. He's not going to Oregon if Moore hasn't communicated with the coaching staff that he intends to declare, unless there's some sort of a push out happening. Dante Moore's finish to the season is quite concerning. because he was a really, really good player. And you saw that he capably has a higher upside than Fernando Mendoza. The problem is, and he's essentially a one-time full-time starter for a full season. He didn't start full-time at UCLA, and he sat last year behind, oh my God, what? Dylan Gabriel. Sat behind Dylan Gabriel. We saw, especially against Indiana and against Texas Tech, and even against JMU with the turnovers that he had in that game, that his decision-making isn't all the way there. How much of a project is Dante Moore?
Joe, I think that Dante Moore potentially being so quick to jump to the NFL after the struggles that he has had against Texas Tech and the struggles that he had against Indiana in the semifinals, I believe that it is a mistake for Dante Moore to potentially jump to the NFL. I think it is. He is a player, as you said, 5 starts at UCLA in a pretty not great situation. He's got 20 career starts, which is not a terrible number, but it's not a great number either. You like to be closer to the 30 mark than you are to the 20 mark, obviously. Dante Moore is an incredibly talented football player. I love the just natural ability to throw the football, the arm talents, everything. It's all there, man. High-level upside for Dante. But he's not ready. Just flat out. Like, in my opinion, he's not ready to play in the NFL. He's 20 years old. I think going back to school would be a much better decision for Dante Moore as currently stands. You're a young guy who ultimately, I think, just needs to play football, man. Like, you just need to play. And I am worried that if he goes to a hypothetical New York Jets situation, right, where you are thrown into the fire in a not great football team that is still developing, will that hurt your development? I think this is a kid that just needs to play football, and I think playing football on the college level will be much better for his long-term development than going and sinking or swimming on the NFL level. So I love Dante Moore, and here's a take, Joe. After saying all that, I think Dante Moore's still going to be my quarterback one if he does end up being a part of the 2026 class, because I tend to gravitate towards the ceiling. That's what I always do. But when I look at the situation we're in with Dante Moore, I don't think he's ready. I love the upside. I love the talent. I do not think he's ready to play in the NFL in 2026. Don't think he's ready.
Moore's projection is quite complex because if he does ultimately confirm that he's declaring, his draft stock is probably not going to tank. He's probably still a top 10 pick. Somebody with limited options might even be willing to take him second overall or trade up to take him second overall. As you just said there, though, he's not ready. I don't think that there's many teams to look at that can take him and let him sit, and he needs to sit. The understanding of making correct decisions and doing it more consistently, it's just not there. And it's not a knock on him. He's not played enough football. It requires time in order to be more natural as a decision maker. The Jets having the second overall pick, I think, is the worst possible thing for him. If he does officially declare, I think the Jets need a quarterback desperately. They've needed one for some time. They've continuously missed and missed and missed. They are the worst possible team for him to go to because they don't have the infrastructure to support him. I'm not trying to dog Jets fans here, but you literally just sold a bunch of your top players. I know that they were defensively. You're going with this OKC Thunder type of a route. You've got a really good budding offensive line. You got one really good receiver. And you got to figure out what the rest of the group is going to do. I think at the very least, it does make me feel better knowing that they do have a solid offensive line that's improving and that has grown over the years with the draft investment that they've had. But I don't love the thought of him going to a team and a fan base that is desperate for someone to turn them around when he's not really ready for that yet. This might be a kid who doesn't feel comfortable and doesn't get to that true stride until year 3. It's going to take time.
Right. Well, so you know what's weird about the Jets, Joe, is I actually kind of like them as a landing spot for a young quarterback in theory, right? When we're talking about they have 5 first-round draft picks over the next 2 years. They have a lot of money that they can invest into future free agents and all that type of stuff. You have a couple building blocks on your offense and a couple building blocks on your defense. There is things to like about the New York Jets in terms of growing a young quarterback. I just don't think Dante Moore is the right one. Like, that's where I come down to. Like, if it was a younger quarterback who I trusted more of the floor and I just needed him to kind of go through the fire a little bit, I would be more open to it, honestly. But again, the fact that Dante, I do think, just needs to play and needs to succeed more than fail right now, I think would be the best case scenario for him. And him going to New York is not going to be that best case. Like, the Denver Broncos 2 years ago when they drafted Bo Nix with Sean Payton, that was a high floor situation. Although the Broncos were not good before Sean Payton, you knew that Sean Payton was going to be able to rebuild that floor pretty quickly because of the type of coach he is. I don't trust Aaron Glenn, and it's no disrespect to Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn might end up being a good head coach down the road, but year 2 Aaron Glenn of an unknown head coach person, I don't know if he's going to be able to rebuild a floor of an organization. I know he's got some ammunition in terms of NFL draft capital, which is really nice to have, but will he be able to capitalize on it? Will he be able to rebuild that floor and make it an appropriate spot for a young quarterback to, although we'll have some peaks and valleys, will ultimately flourish at times as well? That's kind of where it makes me a little bit concerning with a Dante Moore situation, because again, he's not a player that I'm okay with throwing him to the wolves and seeing him fail. I want to see him and I want him to experience success. And I just don't know if that's a situation where he's going to experience enough success early on in his career.
The next quarterback that has been somewhat solidified as the third quarterback expected to go in this draft is Ty Simpson. He declared officially for the 2026 NFL draft. He's a 1-year full-time starter in college football. But he is an older player. He has been around for some time. He's a coach's kid. He checks all those typical boxes. It was also reported that there are major programs that are willing to throw him up to $6.5 million to come back to school. So now the question is asked, should he go back to school or should he declare and stay in this class? Ryan, I think that one thing that's interesting with this conversation, he is not Cam Ward. He is not Carson Beck. Carson Beck decided to go back because he wasn't going in the first round last year. Cam Ward maybe could have risen and gone in the back end of the first round, but was not really being truly discussed as a first-round pick. Ty Simpson does have the tape from this year to warrant a team needing a quarterback to pick him in the middle to the back end of the first round. He's a very gifted player, a lot of highs and lows, and I think that those lows were significantly caused by his teammates letting him down, to be quite frank. His offensive line played poorly. The run game was non-existent. The coaching staff did not set him up for success. It kind of felt like at times they were saying, Ty, go bail us out. Go save us. We desperately need you. And it was too hard for him to do that against Indiana, against Florida State, against Georgia in the SEC championship game. He is not those guys where taking the bread is totally worth it. I think he's been around the sport long enough that it's worth him jumping into the mix. Not to mention the fact, you go back to school, you go somewhere else into a situation that you don't know, and things could go poorly. You could end up dropping just like Garrett Nussmeier did when he could have declared last year and have been a first-round pick last year at the very end of the first round. If you're Ty Simpson, I think that you stick in the draft.
Man, I thought we were actually going to see this one eye to eye, Joe, because I completely disagree. Go back to school, young man. Go back to school. I understand your concerns, and they are completely valid of him being in a new situation and that potentially not being easy of a transition. We agree on that. But the one thing that I disagree with a little bit, Joe, is that when you are a Ty Simpson type of quarterback where the tools are fine, but they're not exceptional, obviously, right? Like, he's not a great athlete. He doesn't have a crazy arm. He's just got requisite solid to good, just kind of across the board. He needs to be a pristine processor. He needs to be. And I thought the processing down the stretch of the season, the second half, was very, very inconsistent, and some bad decisions were littered throughout the back half of that schedule. So I do think that he needs to play because although he's an older prospect, to your point, he is even less experienced than the conversation we just had with Dante Moore. He's got less starts under his belt as a college football player. And I am a believer, and I know I'm a little bit archaic in this scouting perspective, but I am a believer for quarterbacks and offensive linemen, experience matters so much. It's not about how long you've been in college. It's about how much different types of coverages you've seen, different pressure packages, different high leverage situations. I want my quarterback to have been through the ringer before he gets to the NFL. And I don't think Ty's been through the ringer. So another year, I'm not overly concerned with. Whether you are a 24-year-old rookie or a 23-year-old rookie or a 25-year-old rookie, I don't really care because the longevity of the quarterback position is so much bigger than it once was. Like, we have guys playing well into their mid to late 30s, sometimes even into their 40s now, if you are a legitimate quarterback. So Ty Simpson's chance to be anything close to a legitimate quarterback, I think, comes with experience under his belt. Go back to school, get another 12 to 15 starts under your belt, and then enter the 2027 NFL draft. I think experience for this type of quarterback matters so much in today's game.
One guy whose decision has been made for him is Trinidad Chambliss. Chambliss was denied his waiver multiple times to return to school, being a Division II transfer. He's going to try to file legal action. We don't know if that's actually going to work out for him to be able to go back to Ole Miss. Ryan, I love now that there's this buzz, though, building for him as a draft prospect because he has options. It's not just, hey, this kid has to go back to school because he is going to be a Diego Pavia type that is going to live off of the exciting plays but doesn't translate to the NFL. Trinidad Chambliss is no Diego Pavia. He reminds me a lot of Russell Wilson. In the way that he can play as a more compact quarterback, but deceptively has a pretty strong arm for his build. The playmaking ability from him and the ability for him to attack downfield on the run is hard to come by. Where do you sit on this? Do you think that Chambliss is a player who, again, a very quarterback desperate draft with literally zero good options after we get past the first guy, basically? Do you think it's plausible that we could see a Chambliss rise into the first round if he does officially enter the class?
Joe, before this whole thing happened, I didn't think so. In terms, and it's not even the pecking order thing of like Dante Moore, Ty Simpson, like uncertainty, all that type of stuff. I remember watching him early in his starts at Ole Miss after the Austin Simmons injury and all that type of stuff, where I just kind of thought he was a really good college quarterback. Like, that was my pulse that I had on Trinidad Chambliss. Well, I went back and watched some of his games, particularly the last game, even though they lost the football game, obviously, in the playoff against Miami. Joe, I think I was underselling the tools a lot early in this process. I agree with you. I think that his arm is much stronger than I would have guessed or that I anticipated. He's obviously a very creative player outside of structure. He's a very good athlete. But I think the key here is that he is a pocket quarterback. Like, he wants to work in the pocket, and then he has the athleticism to work out of it when problems come. And he's got problem-solving ability because he's got a get-out-of-jail-free card, which is his athleticism. So I just mocked him recently in the early second rounds of a draft for a team. Okay, so I think that I am relatively in that range right now. So I'm not quite first round yet, but let's see how the process plays out because the tools are better than I thought. The playmaking skills are there. In a quarterback needy draft, I actually do think that it's very understanding that a guy like Trinidad Chambliss couldn't be in a first round draft pick. And ultimately, I think that he's kind of earned that. Like, he's played really good football the last few games, man. And I really am. I'm kind of becoming a little bit enamored with Trinidad Chambliss because he's a lot more talented and a lot higher profile passer than maybe I once gave him credit for.
Yeah, I think that there's more to his arm strength than I think anybody would have anticipated. Sometimes when we see these smaller quarterbacks, you just assume, he's not going to have much juice. And especially being a dual threat guy, there's always checks and balances with an overall skill set for a player. Now, a lot of times when we see these dual threat players, it doesn't always happen that they're equally as good of an athlete as they are as a passer. I think what's impressive about Chambliss is the downfield accuracy that he has while also moving, like to be able to connect with guys and to lead them and to not really lose much accuracy. I know that that offense is effectively set up where he's throwing to a lot of really wide open receivers, but I think that if we look past that and actually diagnose what leads to them being so open, it's the fact that he a lot of times improvises, evades pressure, moves on the run, extends plays so much that secondaries don't know how to keep up with him. I would willingly take him into the end of the first round, because at the end of the day, if you're willing to take a guy in the second round, this is the old adage of, if you're willing to take a guy on day 2, why not just take him in the end of the first round? Why not just be decisive and not miss out on that opportunity to find a quarterback that you really, really like? I wonder who that ends up being. Maybe the Steelers are a team that says, we tried to trade up, we can't trade up, we can't go get Ty Simpson, so let's go take the swing on Chambliss. Or maybe they have a comparative grade between the two of them for a lot of the things that we just talked about here. Let's just go with Chambliss and see what we can get out of him. There are, I think, some options for him that would be quite compelling. And if he lands in the right spot, he could be a quarterback in the NFL that carves out a role for himself.
So I have one comment, and then I want to ask you a question, Joe, about Trinidad Chambliss. Okay. So what sold me on Chambliss, there was one play earlier in the season, I forget who it was against, but there was a similar play against Miami where it was on the last drive where you had to have it, right? And he actually drove him down pretty well, and then they obviously had the missed Hail Mary attempt at the end. But there was one play where they had the inside receiver that was just running like a bang eight, like a skinny post, and he had cleared the inside defender, I think was just a linebacker or a safety, and it cleared him, but the guy was on his inside hip, and there was a safety coming over playing like mid-hole, and he rifled this ball in between both of these defenders, which was one of the most that thing had juice on it, man. Like, that was not an easy throw, and that was a throw that you have to have some pepper on it to be able to get to that spot. So again, that is just a testament to better arm strength than I think some people are going to give him credit for. But here's my question. Because we have heard, and it's been reported by like Ty Simpson's dad and stuff, who's a college coach, that most of the feedback they've gotten is first rounds. And I know at least 1 to 2 teams in the NFL right now that do have a first round grade on Ty Simpson for whatever reason. My question for you is, would it shock you if Trinidad Chambliss ended up going higher than Ty Simpson in the 2026 NFL draft if both players are a part of the cycle?
No. Well, and I think that the thing with Chambliss, what we're kind of getting at here, he has the perfect circumstance to be a riser in this class. How many times have we told the story of maybe an unexpected player starts playing well, and then down the stretch in the postseason, they play unbelievably well, and then that performance, that film, starts sliding into the pre-draft process. He meets with teams, he throws at the combine, he throws at his pro day, and then it just keeps snowballing and snowballing. I mean, this is a little bit hyperbolic, but how crazy would it be if he ends up being a top 10 pick? I know that sounds like insane to say, but we've seen stuff like this happen all the time where fringe second rounder turns into a top 10 pick. JJ McCarthy did exactly this with Les. He had less valuable tape, and he ended up going really, really early. A guy that most people agreed was a mid to late day 2 pick suddenly ends up going as early as he did. So don't say it's implausible, not you specifically, but anyone in the comments going, what the hell are you talking about? It happens all the time. And I think that one thing is us as media evaluators, it's very different from NFL evaluators. We're trying to evaluate in a vacuum and look at this as, okay, this is what we saw. This is what looks really good on the film. On film, we look at almost random but specific games. I think that a lot of old decision makers have this very old school approach of, I watched this kid in an important game and I watched him step up, and that is what sticks in their head, and they kind of make their decision based off of, he's a winner, he's a big time player in the big time moments, maybe if they're not 100% sold on everything else. So it wouldn't shock me if he goes ahead of Ty Simpson.
Yeah, I mean, the athleticism is obviously extremely attractive for NFL evaluators, and I think you need it in kind of the modern sense in the modern game for the most part. There's some guys that are just pure pocket kids that can't move out that do succeed, but for the most part, it is becoming more of a space game in the NFL, just as it has been at college. But I also do think that you bring up a great point, Joe, is I know we see some people on draft Twitter and stuff that are like, I watched all 12 games of this player this year. And it's like, well, the NFL doesn't do that. The NFL scouts are watching 3 to 5 games of players, and they're picking out the most important games on the schedule. So what a player did against Alabama A&M doesn't matter to anyone. It matters what they do against Miami in the championship, in the semifinals of the college football playoffs. And in that game, although Chambliss was not perfect, he competed his butt off, man. He made some high-level plays, and there was a reason that Ole Miss was in that football game. On paper, Ole Miss should not have been in that game. But Ole Miss was in the game because a couple of their best, most important players were able to make the biggest plays when it mattered most, and Trinidad Chambliss nearly came out with the upset against Miami, and I think that game is 100% going to matter to evaluators, 100%.
Before we get out of here, let's talk some dominoes in the transfer portal for top quarterbacks. Dylan Raiola announces his commitment to the Oregon Ducks, as we alluded to earlier. It seems that Dante Moore is jumping to the NFL. I would find it very hard to believe that Dylan Raiola makes a move like this with probably lucrative opportunities on the table to go start elsewhere for winning programs. I really like this fit for Dylan Raiola at Oregon. We don't know for sure what the offense is going to look like with Will Stein leaving to take the Kentucky job, but all I can think about is you've got a 3-deep running back room, assuming nobody enters the portal, of young guys that are really great running backs. I mean, Jay Harris even proved that they might have 4 deep at the running back room with the way that he played at the beginning of the Fiesta Bowl before Indiana Oregon almost seemingly completely checked out. But him with DeCornian Moore and Evan Stewart is going to be explosive. I really like that he is jumping to a team that has been one of the most consistent programs in college football. It's not necessarily an elevation from Dante Moore because Dante Moore is equally talented, but I love that Raiola is stepping in here where it's a great fit for both sides.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to say without the offensive coordinator knowledge with Will Stein going to Kentucky, but Dan Lanning has already proven that he can find offensive coordinators, right? Like they went from Kenny Dillingham to Will Stein, so like he's already replaced the coordinator before, and it's ended up working out really well. He also has obviously the track record of like, hey man, we've just done pretty dang good things with Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel to Dante Moore. 2 out of 3 of those players, I would say, were like resurrection projects, obviously, right? That had kind of flamed out a little bit at their previous stops and needed to be built back up in a Dante Moore and a Bo Nix. So I think Dylan Raiola, although Dylan's stats are pretty solid in terms of this past year, he's a guy that I still think needs to get built up, Joe. Like, he's a very talented kid coming off an injury, but we have not seen nearly the best of Dylan Raiola. So the support that you mentioned that's coming back, that also includes potentially having Jabari Johnson back at tight end, who was really good down the stretch of the season, hopefully upgrading the offensive line because it needs to sure be upgraded this offseason as well. I agree that I think Oregon is a good spot for him if he is pressed into starting in 2026 because certainly he has the talent. It's just all about now putting him around the good support and people that have been able to do this before of quarterback development.
Right. I think that the track record of having the ability to build situations for guys needing, I don't think Raiola needs a massive reclamation because I think he's shown positive growth from true freshman to true sophomore, but building an environment that those guys can take that next step. It's happened with every single guy that they've brought in. Now, I say that and watch Dylan Raiola be the one failure in this experiment, but I don't think that that's going to be the case. I really think that we're going to see success once again for Oregon. This coordinator hire is going to be a big key for all of this, but as you alluded to, you have 2 guys that went on to take head coaching jobs in very short periods of time after being the offensive coordinator for Oregon. I think that goes to show that Dan Lanning is really, really good at hiring coordinators. The other quarterback news that comes from today, we saw Sam Leavitt land at LSU. This is something that you reported on Friday night. He took a visit to Miami, and he's still stuck with LSU. I also love the fit of this as well. I know that it kind of seems like I'm just saying I love everything, but Leavitt compares, not completely, but compares to some of the things that Jackson Dart did really, really well when he was at Ole Miss. Mobility, improvisational skills, and I think aggressiveness and willing to put their bodies on the line. There does need to be development and growth, but this offensive core that Lane Kiffin has put together is quite intriguing. If Trey Wilson can stay healthy and if J.C. Brown can take a leap here, there could be some gaudy production from this LSU offense.
Well, Joe, if I had to buy or sell Sam Leavitt in LSU, I would hold it as of today because I have no idea who's playing offensive line for LSU next year. Zero idea. So I think that matters a lot for a kid that's coming off an injury especially. You know how I am with Sam Leavitt, man. I love the highs, but the lows absolutely terrify me. I like him being with Lane Kiffin, but I would have liked him to be in a place that maybe has a little bit more structure early on, because that's no disrespect to Lane Kiffin. He's overhauling this roster from the previous regime, and he's got to figure things out pretty quickly. What is LSU going to be in 2026? I think that is a question that is certainly fair at this point. So I like the talent of Sam Leavitt, but the chaotic nature and just the lack of unknowns for LSU right now, like that does leave me a little bit weary, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that their offensive line still needs a little bit of work, and there's a bit of a boom or bust to the outcome here with this LSU offense because you could have a lot of juice on the outside, and Leavitt could end up playing really well, but he's injury prone, and again, that offensive line last year underperformed. There is that possibility that Leavitt ends up taking a lot of hits early. He ends up getting banged up again. You're turning to the kid from Elon whose name is escaping me that they brought in, and maybe he ends up being Clark, the Trinidad Chambliss of this team. But I think that LSU is a bit of a wait and see mode. I think that it's on the right track. And here's the best part about this, Ryan. He's young. He's got 2 more years of eligibility theoretically for him to stick around and be a part of this team. And that was exactly what Jackson Dart did. He stayed for the full extent of his eligibility, and then he went in the first round, and he's done pretty well and shown positive signs as a rookie. There is a growth potential between Leavitt and Kiffin over the next couple of years for the right foundation being built. That was why I didn't really like the idea of a stopgap type of a guy that was a 1-year solution. I feel like you needed to go and get somebody that was maybe investing in the long term, and hopefully Leavitt does exactly that.
Yeah, I think that is a fair assessment. There is the fact that Leavitt does have multiple years of eligibility left. We don't know if that'll work out, obviously, and if he's a guy that does enter the 2027 NFL draft. But to your point, this is not a 1-year boomer bust. This is it. This could be potentially a multi-year conversation between Lane Kiffin and Sam Leavitt. So I do give you credence to that. That is a good point. I think that there is some validity to, hey, maybe you break this kid all the way down this year, rebuild him back up, and then 2027 is actually the year where he has his big-time play with LSU. It's going to be interesting to see, though, how that develops.
All right, everybody, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Comment below your thoughts on all of our takes on today's show. We'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your week.